In this session, we will cover the Fall 1 Aggregate Report 1.17, the LCFF Unduplicated Pupil Count. In 2013, the governor proposed major changes in how the state allocates funding to school districts, called a Local Control Funding Formula, or LCFF. Those changes were enacted as part of the 2013-14 budget package. The local control funding formula contains several components, including additional funding for students in two categories, the disadvantaged low-income students and the English learners, to calculate the unduplicated pupil count, also referred to as the UPC. Our focus in this session is on the CALPADS business rules for the UPC, which is displayed on Report 1.17. Students eligible for supplemental and grant funding are determined based on their enrollment as of Census Day, or also known as Information Day, which is always the first Wednesday in October. The 1.17 report summarizes students enrolled on Census Day that are included in the funding formula calculations. Students may qualify in multiple categories, but will only be counted once. Eligibility is determined based on students qualifying for a variety of programs such as free or reduced price meal, migrant ed, homeless, or tribal foster youth. Students can also be included if they are identified as foster youth through state matching process or flagged with direct certification through another state matching process done monthly. The last category for LCFF is being classified as an English learner. The Report 1.17 format will provide duplicated counts for the students qualifying by multiple criteria, as well as an unduplicated count by school, where a student is counted only one time per school. This is so the LEA can see all the different ways a student was identified as FRPM eligible. Students enrolled at a juvenile court school on Census Day will automatically be counted as FRPM eligible. Now let's go over each column, starting with enrollment. The first column, starting from the left side, is the total enrollment column, enrollment by school. The report only counts students who are LCFF apportionment eligible, which are grades KN through 12, including 4-year-old transitional kindergartners meeting the birth date criteria. In future years, the reports will be adjusted annually to include the 4-year-old transition kindergarten TK students who will turn 5 by specified dates. In the 2022-23 school year, Report 1.17 included students if they turned 5 years old between September 2nd, 2022 and February 2nd, 2023. Refer to Flash 228 for more information on TK transitional students data in CALPADS. Now, please note, the enrollment count on Report 1.17 is not the same as the enrollment reported on Report 1.1, which is the enrollment primary and short-term enrollment counts by subgroup. So on to the next 6 columns, boxed here in red. These are counts of students who are eligible for a free or reduced price meal, sometimes referred to as the FRPM eligible collectively, because it is not just free or reduced price meals that qualify a student as disadvantaged. The first column in the FRPM eligible group counts the students with a program record of 181 for free meals or 182 for reduced price meals. This count includes students whose families submitted applications on or before October 31st for the National School Lunch Program or for provision schools and schools without meal programs, students whose families submitted alternative income forms and were determined to meet the income guidelines eligible criteria for NSLP. The second column, labeled foster youth, is derived from a statewide matching process done weekly with the Department of Social Services. Data from Child Welfare Services, or the Case Management System, which is CWS CMS, is matched to CALPADS data to identify foster youth students. Additionally, some foster youth can be manually matched through CALPADS for whom LEAs believe are foster youth. In order to manually match a foster student in CALPADS, students must be initially reported in the Department of Social Services Child Welfare Case Management System. Keep in mind, LCFF statutes, as amended by the state, specifies the type of foster students qualifying for funding and services under LCFF. Over the years, the legislature amends the statutes to clarify which type of foster students qualify for additional funding and services. In 2020-21, tribal foster was added to the FRPM eligible definition for LCFF. And in 2022-23, the voluntary placement youth, this is foster youth who are the subject of a voluntary placement agreement per AB 1055, were included in the statewide foster youth matching and included in the FRPM eligible definition for LCFF. So real quickly, the foster youth definition used by LCFF is as follows. Foster youth are children who are the subject of a petition filed under Welfare and Institutions Code, WIC, Section 300, meaning a court has taken jurisdiction over a child and declared the child to be a dependent of the court due to the presence or risk of abuse or neglect. A child or youth who is the subject of a petition filed under WIC Section 602, meaning a court has taken jurisdiction over a child and declared the child to be a ward of the court due to the child's violation of certain criminal laws. Or a youth between ages of 18 and 21 who is enrolled in high school, is a non-minor dependent under the placement responsibility of child welfare, probation, or a tribal organization participating in an agreement pursuant to WIC Section 10553.1 and is participating in a transitional living case plan. Recently added voluntary placement youth, foster youth who are subject of a voluntary placement agreement per AB 1055. So now, we're into the third column, tribal foster. These are students flagged with a tribal foster program code 193. The tribal foster students are dependents of an Indian tribe, consortium of tribes, or a tribal organization. Assembly Bill 1962 requires that the CDE to include tribal foster youth in the unduplicated pupil count to determine funding under the LCFF supplemental and concentration grants and in the foster youth student group on the California school dashboard beginning in the 2020-21 school year. The next column, the fourth one in the FRPM eligible grouping, is homeless. This follows the tribal foster youth column. And in the homeless column, we will count students identified as homeless and reported in program 191. Migrant ed here is the fifth column, and it contains a count of migrant ed students as reported in program 135. The last column, direct certification. This is the final column in the FRPM eligible group, are the counts of students who were directly certified as eligible for free meals through the direct certification process. Direct certification is a monthly match of CALPADS information to the state CalWORKS, CalFresh, and Medi-Cal databases. Data is matched by name, demographics, and student addresses. The 1.17 snapshot report will automatically include direct certification matches identified through the November poll. So those are the 6 groupings of FRPM eligible. And then we have the unduplicated eligible free reduced price meal counts. This column represents the unduplicated count of students eligible for free or reduced price meals that qualify in multiple categories, but are only counted once in the unduplicated count. So one last note to be aware of, students enrolled at a juvenile court school on census day will automatically be counted as FRPM eligible and counted here in the unduplicated FRPM eligible column, regardless of these previous counts. Next, we have the EL funding eligible, English learners. These are students eligible for supplemental funding as English learners. They are students with a language acquisition status of EL as of census day. And this is the same English learner count as reported on the 2.8 report in CalPADS, the English language acquisition status count by primary language. The final unduplicated count, last column, the total unduplicated count includes students eligible for free or reduced price meals. which were noted in the previous 6 columns, and/or English learners. This is the official LCFF unduplicated pupil count that represent the students that qualify in multiple categories, but are counted only once in the unduplicated count. This is the count that will be used as the basis to determine funding for the supplemental and concentration grants under LCFF. So there's some additional rules to be aware of. Charter schools are reported separately, whether they report with their district or independently. A district will only be able to view certified totals of the independently reporting charter schools. And as with all certification reports, there is a detailed report with a list of students included in the counts. So the 1.18 report is the detailed report that lists students and the attributes that qualify the student for supplemental funding. There are several key points about Report 1.17. All of the counts in the report reflect students enrolled on Census Day, otherwise referred to as Information Day. The reports reflect a point-in-time count. To view the report, users must have 2 roles, the Fall 1 report role and the free reduced price meal role. It is critical that LEAs meet the initial reporting deadline. CDE will pull information from CALPADS after the initial submission deadline for preliminary reporting. Refer to the CALPADS calendar for current year deadline dates. And remember that Fall 1 requires data for all schools and all the aggregate reports to be complete in order to approve this submission. You can't just approve the data needed for 1.17 supplemental funding. Under LCFF, the county offices of education have specific oversight responsibilities. County offices will be given access to view their district's approved totals through the county reports. They will not be able to see any student level data, so in addition to state monitoring, county offices will also be monitoring LEAs to ensure that they meet the submission deadlines. Under the California Universal Meals Program, beginning in 2022-23, all students may receive a free meal. However, the program is premised on schools continuing to receive funding under the federal meal program. Therefore, LEAs must continue to collect the National School Lunch Program NSLP applications. In addition, for schools that operate under a federal community eligibility provision, CEP, and are prohibited from collection meal applications, schools must collect the alternative income forms for purposes of identifying low-income students for the unduplicated pupil count used to determine supplemental and concentration grant funding under LCFF. All forms, whether they are NSLP applications or alternative income forms, must be signed by a parent and returned to the LEA by October 31st. But they do not have to be processed by October 31st to qualify for eligibility. They just have to be returned. Under LCFF statutes, those schools operating a federal meal program under a community eligibility provision, CEP, which do not collect NSLP applications at all and instead collect the alternative income form, and schools operating under a provision 2 or 3, which only collect NSLP applications in a base year and then every 3 years thereafter, are only required to collect alternative forms or NSLP applications at least once every 4 years, and for all newly enrolled students at the intervening years. LEAs, however, must continue to submit program data for identified students to CALPADS every year. CDE has an FAQ, frequently asked questions page, just for the LCFF questions. LEAs must complete the initial LPAC testing before Census Day in order for students to qualify as EL. Auditors review CALPADS data for students in these schools just as they review CALPADS data at other schools. So schools should be prepared to show auditors the original documentation that a student is FRPM eligible, which could be up to 3 years. For additional information, you can refer to the frequently asked questions and subscribe to the LCFF listserv. And for more information, you can use the email address and phone number listed here.